129, just so you've got your books ready.
The other way. The other one.
Bruchim Abaim, welcome, Shabbat Shalom, good morning, welcome to our Shabbat service together. We have just experienced Matovu, a new melody for Matovu that Dean composed and allows us to gather together as a community, one big community, some of us here in the synagogue and some of us at home. You've transformed your space into a space of prayer. We're on page 129, service number 5. Do sit down if you're standing as we just offer these words. Do join me if you're here in the synagogue with us. Source of light, of truth, and of the impulse within us towards justice and mercy. May this hour of worship be one of vision and inspiration. Help us to find knowledge by which to live. Let the words we speak enter our hearts and influence our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary, this synagogue, whether here in the walls of our building or whether at home in our virtual wider community. Bless all of us in search of you or in need of comfort and consolation. May the offering of our hearts be acceptable to you, and may the prayers we utter here bear fruit in acts of kindness, peace, and love. So I offer now the prayer over Torah study before we share some words from the prophet Micah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So these striking words from the prophet Micah that reminds us what is it to be a Jew, what is it to be a religious individual, and why our liberal tradition found such comfort in these words. Dean, I'm going to ask you to read responsively with me and to lead the community who's in the synagogue. You are allowed to read, just not sing. So do join in if you would like. With what shall I approach the Eternal One?
How shall I worship the God of heaven?
Shall I come before God with burnt offerings?
Or with yearling calves?
Will God be pleased with thousands of rams?
Or with 10,000 rivers of oil?
Should I give my firstborn for my transgressions?
The fruit of my body for the sins of my soul?
People tell you what is good, but what does the Eternal One require of you?
Only to do justly and love mercy and walk humbly with your God.
And this from the Mishnah that reminds us of what is most important in life. Elu davarim she'adam ochel פירותיהן בעולם הזה, והקרן קיימת לא לעולם הבא. These are actions which bring benefit here and now, but whose full value can be measured only in the light of eternity. Honoring one's mother and father, acts of love and kindness, diligent pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, hospitality to strangers, visiting the sick, enabling bride and groom to rejoice, which we did only last weekend, which seems extraordinary, consoling the bereaved, praying with sincerity, and making peace where there is strife. And the study of Torah leads to them all. V'talmud Torah keneged kulam. Eternal God, may the words of Torah taste sweet to us, to all Israel, that we and our children and all the children of your people may come to know you by studying Torah. We praise you, O God, teacher of your people, Israel. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam baruch hu, baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamchulal b'fi amo, meshubach umfa'ar b'shon chasidav v'avadav, b'shvachot u'vizmarot nagadelcha v'namlichecha, malkenu yachid chei ha'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai melech mechulal b'tish b'chot. We turn now to Psalm 150. We're on page 134 as we offer the melody by Debbie Friedman, Zichrona Levracha. We're on page 135. Let's stand, if you can, and choose to for Yishtabach.
Yishtabach Shimcha Lad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VaHaKadosh B'Shamayim U'Va'aretz Ki Lecha Na'eh Adonai Eloheinu V'Elohei Avotenu Shir U'Shvacha Halel V'Zimra Brachot V'Hodaot Me'ata Ve'ad Olam Baruch Atah Adonai Habocher B'Shirei Zimra Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Let's sit down as we go into the two blessings before the Shema. We're on page 136. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzei or uvorech hoshech oseh shalom uvoreh et hakol hame'ir la'aretz v'ledarim aleha barachamim uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai kulam b'chochma asita malach ha'aretz kinyanecha titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha V'al morei or she'asita, Yufaruch ha'sela, Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzei hamorot. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching, make us faithful to your commandments, and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'yamo Yisrael b'ahava. So if you'd like to stand for the Shema, our watchword of faith. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha, u'v'chol nafshecha, u'v'chol mo'odecha. V'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele, asher anochi matzava ha'hayom al levavecha, v'shenantam levanecha v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha, v'leftecha b'derech, u'v'shoppecha u'kumecha, u'kashartam lo'ot al yadecha, v'hayu lototafot beinenecha, k'tavtam al muzot beitecha, u'visharecha.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Feel free to sit down as we offer these words אמת ויציב וישר וקיים וטוב ויפה הדבר הזה עלינו לעולם ועד. אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו. מלכנו מלך אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו. פודנו ומצילנו מעולם הוא שמך. אין אלוהים זולתך. אמת אתה הוא ראשון ואתה הוא אחרון, ומבלעדיך אין לנו מושיע. ממצרים גאלתנו אדוני אלוהינו, ומבית עבדים פדיתנו. משה ומרים ובני ישראל, לך אנו שירה בשמחה רבה, ואמרו כולם.
מי כמוך באלים, אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף פלא.
שירה חדשה שיבחו גואלים, לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו.
אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
Tefillah, the Amidah, the standing prayer, if you're able and willing to stand. We're on page 140 as we offer it together.
Adonai sevatai tiftach uviagit tehilatecha. Adonai sevatai tiftach uviagit tehilatecha.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu. Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov. Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon. Gomel Hasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol. V'Zocher Chasdei Avot ve'Imahot. U'Mevi Gula Livnei B'neihem. Lema'an Shemo B'Yahava. Melech Ozer Moshiach Magen. Baruch atah Adonai. Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל.
מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים וחולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך? מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה.
ונאמר נטע להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech Ol Haaretz Kevodo.
Kavodo Malay Olam.
Baruch Kavod Adonai Mimko.
ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך.
Loch Adonai Leolam, Elohai Zion, Tovador, Hallelujah. Tovador, Nagir God Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Kedushatcha Nakdish. Tovador, Tovador, Nagir God Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Kedushatcha Nakdish. B'Shivcha Eloheinu, Binu lo yamush leolam va'ed, Ki el melech gadol, Ki el melech gadol, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tovador, Tovador, Nagid God Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Kedushatcha Nakdish.
Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Let's sit down as we mark Shabbat. That's what we're here for, to celebrate Shabbat with each other.
Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Mekadashei, Mekadashei Shavi Shabbat. Kulam yisbu v'yitamru mituvecha Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. V'hashvi'i ratzita bo v'kidashto Shabbat. Kendak yamim, oto karata Shabbat, Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Zecher Maseh Bereshit Shabbat. Zecher Maseh Bereshit Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. We're on page 144 Eternal God, be gracious to your people Israel, and in your love accept their prayers. May our worship now and always be acceptable in your sight. We praise you, O God, whom alone we worship in reverence. And now together, our blessing for gratitude and thanksgiving. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu leolam va'ed. Tzur hayenu magen yishenu, ata hu lador vador, nodeh lachan saper tehilatecha, al hayenu hamsurim biyadecha, v'al nishmotenu hapekudot lach, v'al nisecha shebachol yom imanu, v'al niflotecha v'tovotecha shebachol eit erev v'boker v'tzoharayim, baruch ata Adonai, hatov shimcha u'lacha na'eh lohodot.
Sim shalom, tova uvracha, chema chesed v'rachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, amecha, barchenu avinu, kulanu ke'echad, ve'or panecha, ki ve'or panecha natata lanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu, Jael ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, Torat chayim ve'ahavat chesed, u'tzedaka uvracha v'rachamim v'chayim v'shalom. Sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, v'tov b'einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, עמך.
Baruch atah Adonai Oseh Hashalom. We praise you, O God, source of peace. Let's take a few moments for silent prayer or reflection, whatever moves us or gives us space to sit.
אלוהי נצור לשוני מרע ושפתי מדבר ממה ואלים קל עלי נפשי תדור ונפשי כעפל הכל תהיה אלוהי ממה velim kalalai nafshi tidom venafshi ke'afal hakol tihiye Elohai Elohai P'tach libi P'tach libi P'tach libi B'toratecha Elohai netzor l'shoni meira ושפתיי דבר ממה velim kalalai nafshi tidom venafshi ke'afal hakol tihiye Elohai 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 Adonai Tzuri V'goali Adonai Tzuri V'goali Ratzon Irifi Adonai Tzuri V'goali Adonai Tzuri
So we turn now to page 481, Kriyat HaTorah, the Torah service, at the heart of our Shabbat morning service. Stand if you'd like as we open the ark and Michael takes out the Torah. Soon I'll be able to hold it myself, but not quite yet.
Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai ve'ein k'maasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'kol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai oz le'amoitein Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom.
So we are at our Torah reading this week. We're in Parashat Behalotecha, which has much in it, but most notably the final section, which made me go off-piste from our usual triennial cycle of reading the middle one. Do sit down, everyone. That we had to have this extraordinary scene in chapter 12 which was when Miriam and Aaron, but it seems Miriam led, because unusually we get the female conjugation of the word and she spoke, when they are criticizing Moses, not to his face, al-odot, about Moses, and in particular al-odot ha'isha ha-kushit, the Cushite wife that Moses took. Now, commentators have written many lines and pages. Is this a comment about Zipporah, his wife, and the colour of her skin? Is this the fact that Moses has taken another wife? Is this the fact that his marriage is in trouble and his brother and sister are commenting on it? Is this actually only a kind of a fuse for the fact that really they want to speak with jealousy about why the hand of prophecy hasn't landed on them and they don't have the same degree of authority and power as Moses has? Either way, it's an extraordinary exchange of three siblings and of what happens, and of how Aaron takes responsibility when Miriam is punished, how we have this extraordinary shortest prayer that exists in the whole of our Hebrew tradition, the words El na Rafa na la, which Moses says about Miriam, which is considered to be one of the most poignant about healing, and actually that's all you need to say, please God heal her, and we will hear the words from Torah. It really conjures up, it has allowed us to consider whether speaking behind someone's back is so much worse than speaking to them, that al-odot. Is that why they're punished? Is that why in Jewish tradition we talk of lashon hara, and actually the way we speak about people matters just as much, maybe if not more, than the way we speak to them? Or is it that some assumptions are made about Moses and his wife? I share in our Torah study groups that when I spent my year in Israel, when I was studying to be a rabbi, I studied with Moshe Shinyan, who is a professor at the Hebrew University and an expert in Moses. His work is all about studying the Midrashim, the stories about Moses. And he was asked to be the rabbinic authority or advice on the film The Prince of Egypt. And he tells the story that there were two things that the studios wanted his advice on. What should God's voice sound like? And we know that God's voice is actually Moses' voice because Moses hears God in his head. And the second issue, which comes directly from this passage of Torah, is what colour should they shade Zipporah's skin? How should they present the wife of Moses? Should they take advantage and really use the cartoon and the animation to make comments about culture and peoplehood and race? So I always remember, and that was at least 20 years ago, that he was asked to help on that film, and that was one of the questions that he was asked. But I'm going to share a little bit more about this afterwards. So we're in chapter 12. Those of you who are coming in online, you will be able to see the text on the screen. I think Josie will share. And those of us here, bear with me, because here we are, yes. And those of us here, you can either follow chapter 12 in the Chumash, or I will read and translate. Super delighted to call up Darren as our Aliyah LaTorah. Darren, as we did last week, I will call you up and then I will back away from the Torah scroll so you're able to bless the Torah safely. And then if you just hover on the steps, I will come back to the Torah and then you can come back and bless it. So, Ya'amod Elkanan ben Sion, levarech et haTorah. So it's the middle column, if you want to look at it.
Right. Okay. Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher barcha banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. ותדבר מרים ואהרון במשה על עדות האישה הכושית אשר לקח, כי אישה כושית לקח. ויאמרו, הרק אך במשה דיבר אדוני, הלא גם בנו דיבר, וישמע אדוני. והאיש משה ענב מאוד מכל האדם אשר על פני האדמה. ויאמר אדוני פתאום אל משה ואל אהרון ואל מרים, צאו שלושתכם אל אוהל מועד. ויצאו שלושתם, וירד אדוני בעמוד ענן. ויעמוד פתח האוהל, ויקרא אהרון ומרים, ויצאו שניהם. ויאמר, שמעו נא דברי, אם יהיה נביכם אדוני במראה אליו את ודע בחלום אדבר בו. לא כן עבדי משה, בכל ביתי נאמן הוא, פה אל פה אדבר בו ומראה, ולא בחידת ותמונת אדוני יביט. ומדוע לא יראתם לדבר בעבדי ומשה? ויחר אף אדוני בם וילך. והענן סע מעל האוהל, והנה מרים מצרת כשלג. ויפן אהרון אל מרים, והנה מצרת. ויאמר אהרון אל משה, בי אדוני אל נא תשתה עלינו חטאת, אשר נועלנו, ואשר חטאנו, אל נא תהי כמת, אשר בצאתו מרחם אמו, ויאכל חצי בשרו. ויצעק משה אל אדוני לאמור, אל נא רפא נעליו. Now I'm going to read a little bit more because I just couldn't resist. The story is so intense and compelling. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, אביה, ירוק ירק בפניך, הלא תחלם 7 ימים, תסגר 7 ימים מחוץ למחנה, ואחרי תאסף, ותסגר מרים מחוץ למחנה 7 ימים, והעם לא נסע עד האסף מרים, ואחר נסו העם מחצרות ויחנו במדבר פרן. So Miriam and Aaron spoke about Moses, but it's really significant here. Vatadaber allows it to seem as if it's just Miriam speaking. Miriam and Aaron spoke about Moses, and particularly about his wife, his Cushite wife. Cushite is either Ethiopian or Sudanese. His Cushite wife that he had taken because she was Cushite. Because he had taken a Cushite wife. And they spoke, and they carried on, which makes us think, was this just a ruse, some way that they needed to get off their chest, their jealousy? Why is it only through Moses that God speaks, and not also through us that God speaks? And God heard. And then, as if we need to know this about Moses, Moses, the man Moses, was extremely humble, extremely modest, the word enough, out of all or every individual literally on the face of the earth. So we're told this to know that this was not Moses' doing. And God spoke suddenly. We're really getting the drama of the story. Pitom literally means suddenly in modern Hebrew too. God spoke suddenly to Moses, to Aaron, and to Miriam, and told them, come out, all 3 of you, to the tent of meeting. And so the 3 of them did come out. And God came down in a pillar of cloud, and God literally stood at the tent of meeting, and called out, and called Aaron and Miriam out, and called that the 2 of them should come out. And God said, listen very carefully to my words. If there are any prophets of God amongst you all, then I will reveal myself or speak to them. I make myself known to them in dreams, and that is how I speak to them, through dreams or through some kind of visions. But not so with my servant Moses, who is trusted in all my house, and who I speak mouth to mouth, literally, mouth to mouth. And I make known myself to him in this way. And actually, that's how my clarity is that he experiences. Why, therefore, are you questioning my relationship with my servant Moses? And I love this. God is furious and leaves. So, that's the moment. God has said what needs to be said. And the cloud leaves, moves away from off the top of the ohel, of the tent of meeting. And behold, what happens immediately afterwards is that Miriam is mutsarat, which literally means, we think it's not the word for leprosy, but her skin is covered with scales, white. White like snow, matzarat kashalek, so like snow. And Aaron turns to Miriam, and behold, she is covered in white scales. And Aaron calls out to Moses and says, my Lord, he actually addresses it he's learnt his lesson. He addresses Moses, my Lord, do not leave her like this with our sins, the sins that we, and he takes responsibility, the sins that we have committed, do not leave her like this with the sin within her, so that she looks like a child that comes out dead from its mother's womb with half of its flesh eaten. It's a very graphic image. And Moses immediately, we don't see what Moses is thinking, but immediately Moses calls out to God, saying, heal her, please. Oh God, heal her, please. And God answers in this very harsh language, saying, wouldn't a father want to spit on his daughter's face for this kind of behavior? Wouldn't she need to be shut out for 7 days and excluded for 7 days from the camp, and only after that to be readmitted? So it was that Miriam was shut out from the camp for 7 days. And whilst those 7 days happened, the children of Israel did not move. They did not journey anywhere until Miriam had been readmitted and rejoined them. And then the people journeyed from Hatzrot, and they journeyed and camped in the Midbar in the desert of Paran. You can see, how could I have resisted sharing that with you this morning? Derek.
Excuse me. Sorry.
And I've got no water. Oh, we do have water.
Oh,
You can have my water. You want my water? Just at the
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu tzorat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yishakar. Do you feel like for a hackbar?
Sorry. I don't mind.
Yeah, have a go.
Okay.
Remember to bend your knees.
Yeah.
It's already like slightly to the right. Well, as long as you're right-handed, you're all right. Let's stand. Darren is going to raise the Torah.
Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah. Le'amo Yisrael mikedushato. Romemu Adonai
We turn now to the Haftarah. Do sit down in the sanctuary. And I chose this Haftarah that we rarely hear it, if ever, because it really, I think, if the Torah responds to misunderstandings, and prejudice and relationships and concern about relationships, but loyalty and love, then the Haftarah captures all of that too. The Haftarah is taken from the book of Samuel, which captures the relationship between David, while Saul is still alive. David is going to be king, but we don't know it yet, and Saul's son Jonathan. Famously, a very loving relationship between the two. And we hear the words and see how you feel, whether they reflect, they echo, they amplify the words of Torah. Delighted that our own Elliot Levy will be reading Haftarah this morning from home. So just a reminder to us in the sanctuary so that we can hear Elliot reading. Over to you, Elliot.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'cha b'nviim tovim v'ratza b'divreichem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah Moshe abdo v'Yisrael amo v'nviei ha'emet v'tzedek. Then David fled from Naioth at Ramah and went to Jonathan and asked, "What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he's trying to kill me?" "Never," Jonathan replied. "You're not going to die. Look, my father doesn't do anything, great or small, without letting me know. Why would he hide this from me? It isn't so." But David took an oath and said, "Your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes." And he said to himself, "Jonathan must not know this, or he will be grieved. Yet as surely as God lives and as you live, there's only a step between me and death." Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you." So David said, "Look, tomorrow is the new moon feast, and I'm supposed to dine with the king. But let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow. If your father misses me at all, tell him David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. If he says, 'Very well,' then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that he's determined to harm me. As for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Eternal. If I'm guilty, then kill me yourself. Why hand me over to your father?" "Never," Jonathan said. "If I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you?" David asked, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" "Come," Jonathan said, "let's go out into the field." So they went there together. Then Jonathan said to David, "I swear by the Eternal, the God of Israel, that I will surely sound out my father by this time the day after tomorrow. If he's favorably disposed toward you, will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father intends to harm you, may the Eternal deal with Jonathan, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away in peace. May the Eternal God be with you as God has been with my father. But show me unfailing kindness, like the Eternal's kindness, as long as I live, so that I may not be killed. And do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Eternal has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth." So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Eternal call David's enemies to account, And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, because he loved him as he loved himself. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, so kol ha'olamim tzadik b'hol hadorot, ha'el ha'neman ha'omer ve'oseh, hamdaber u'mkayem shechol devarav, emet v'tzedek, al haTorah v'al ha'avodah, v'al hanvim v'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh, shenatah lanu Adonai Eloheinu, likdusha v'limnucha lakavod u'tifaret, al hakol Adonai Eloheinu, anachnu modim lach u'mevarachim otach, Yitbarach Shimacha b'fi kol hai, tamid elam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Yeshua, Elliot, thank you so much for bringing so much in that reading of David and Jonathan. We are on page 484 as we stand for the congregational prayer.
Eternal God, we ask your blessing on our Queen Elizabeth and all the royal family, as well as those who govern our country. Guide them and all who govern our country with a spirit of wisdom and compassion, so that they care for the citizens and the stranger and bring benefit to all the inhabitants of our country and the world. Bless all our brothers and sisters of the House of Israel. Bless our congregation and all its members. Be those who seek your presence and all who are in need of healing, spiritual or physical. Let them know that you are near to comfort them and to sustain them. May peace exist in the state of Israel soon and in our time. May you, eternal God, grant peace, blessing to her, establish as an age-old dream and a home to the oppressed. May its leaders and citizens be inspired with a faithfulness to the aims of its founders, and may the country be imbued with the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice always. May this Shabbat renew our energy to build and sustain a better world and to deepen our gratitude of so much that surrounds us. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. We are on the foot of page 486. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai ki nizgav shemo levado.
Odor eretz v'shamayim v'yarim keren ne'amor tehila lechol chasidav livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Page 489. Behold, a good doctrine has been given you. Do not forsake it. It is a tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all who cling to it find happiness.
It's time he lamachazikim ba v'tom echeha meushan d'rachecha darchei
sit down. I noticed that Michael and Daisy and baby Elijah, well, I think maybe baby Elijah asked the question, why was Aaron not punished and only Miriam? It's so problematic in this story that it is Miriam who is punished. And there's only one way to maybe discern some kind of justice in this, which is the female conjugation of the verb, that maybe she spoke and he stood by her side. But I think particularly that last verse of God speaking about her with such almost abusive viciousness of how she'd behaved, when I think it was clear the two of them were struggling with their status with the people. So it's an unsatisfactory answer. And the only one that I think offers any justice is that verb, vatadaber, that maybe it was Miriam that spoke and that's why she was punished. But I suspect many of us see other motives at play, that perhaps she was being made an example of. So to me, the passage this morning allows us to really consider what it is in terms of the assumptions and prejudices that we hold, of who gets to speak, of how we respond to other people, of what we say about them, of often the decisions that we make before people have spoken. I'd like to really share an anecdote, a story this morning that I think more and more I feel in life it's the stories of things that we learn from other people that help us or direct us, inform, inspire us of how we choose to behave in the world. And then to just finish with the words of Rabbi John Rayner that we used last night that feel so pertinent, so relevant to our conversation right now in May of 2021. So this anecdote comes out of a conversation that Rabbi Rick Jacobs, who leads the Reform movement in the United States, and a Reform Jew in Israel. But this Reform Jew, Dr. Raphael Walden, happens to be a vascular surgeon and chair of Physicians for Human Rights in Israel, and is a pretty incredible person, and we're going to hear about him. But he shares a fantastic story about assumptions and prejudices that lead to so much damage, and he's able, in his role, to offer so much hope. And I feel that this story is just so relevant and poignant for us for so many reasons at the moment. So Dr. Raphael Walden is Deputy Director of the Sheba Medical Center in Tel Aviv, which is one of the 10 best hospitals, medical centers possibly on the planet. And as a vascular surgeon, he is very prominent within this medical center. And I'm not going to tell you yet what this medical center ends up doing, but I'm going to share his words of the story that he shares. So he explains to Rabbi Rick Jacobs, we know the American Reform movement is the biggest Jewish movement in the States. This is significant because of the access it has to really significant conversations, both in the United States. They often are able to invite the president or past presidents to their conferences, but also in terms of access to Israel. They absolutely pursue a peaceful notion of coexistence, but they're incredibly supportive as well of Israel. But this particular interview is very interesting. So Rick Jacobs says, are there examples of difficult places that you work as a doctor in the land of Israel in terms of building bridges between Palestinian Israelis, Palestinians, and so Arab Israelis, Palestinian Israelis, Palestinians and Israelis in terms of bringing healing? It's really significant that Dr. Raphael Walden, Raphael literally means God heals. So there can be no greater, irony, beautiful irony that he is the healer. He is, and known to everyone who knows and loves him as Rafi. And Rick Jacobs says, are there any examples of things that you have learned about coexistence, about assumptions you make, about things you have learned within the work that you do and within the matzav, the situation that we are amongst or within at the moment? And Professor Dr. Walden says, yes, it is. It's been a very difficult, long conflict between Jews and Arabs in Palestine. And we in the Organization of Physicians for Human Rights are trying to bridge a greater understanding and to work hard at it. But sometimes it is really awkward and difficult, he says. Let me tell you, he says to Rabbi Rick Jacobs, a small anecdote which occurred some time ago, a few years ago, but which had a great effect on me. So this is him explaining. I'm a vascular surgeon, and one night I'm called to the emergency room of the Sheba Medical Center in Tel Aviv, where I'm called to treat a severely wounded young man. And as I come in, I'm getting his notes. It's a Palestinian boy, a 15-year-old Palestinian boy, who was wounded by the IDF, probably during a stone-throwing incident. He was very severely wounded, and he got some first aid in a local hospital, but due to the severity and complexity of his injury, he was transferred to my hospital. We frequently and try very hard to treat as many Palestinians as possible and to use the resources that we have to look after Israelis, Palestinian Israelis, and Palestinians. There was a brief note from the doctor who treated him in the first place when he was first admitted, stating that his name was Ahmed, and a few brief details about his injury and the first aid that he was given. And that's about it. So I entered the emergency ward and I met this young boy. And the first thing that struck me was his eyes. His eyes were very black. He was extremely pale. He had lost a tremendous amount of blood. He was pale, and from his eyes alone one could see, or so I thought, the expression of all the hatred in the world that one can imagine. Hatred towards his enemy, and hatred towards us who were considered to be part of the enemy. I speak some basic Arabic, so I approach him and I say, Ahmed, I'm your doctor. Can you look at me? Can you tell me what you feel? Not a single response, only what I assumed was hatred in his eyes. Ahmed, can you move your leg? Let me help you. Not a single word. After a long minute, a long moment, through his clenched teeth, just one single word, jihad. Well, everyone knows what jihad is. Jihad means holy war against infidels. And I hear the curses amongst the medical staff behind my back saying, we're trying to save his life and he's giving us this terrorist Islamic propaganda. Send him back where he's coming from. Let them take care of him. But I came back and I say again, Ahmed, stop this nonsense. Tell me what you feel. Can you move your arms or your hands? Can you move your leg? Say no to me. Say anything. After a long moment again, with a dark look, he says again, jihad. At this point, I gave away any attempt to create a fruitful dialogue with the boy, any productive way of talking to him. I take him straight to the operating room. The operation was very long, tedious, complicated, but it ended successfully. When it was over, it was morning already, so I ask, is there someone from the family here? And I'm told, yes, his father is outside. So I went out of the operating room and there was a group of men and the father came out. And it appeared that he was a doctor who spoke decent English. So I tell him that during the operation, how tough it was. And I say, I can't help but feel respect for this young boy who had the good guts to defy us. You know, there was a talking piece between him and me, and I tried to talk to him. He's telling the father. And the father approaches him, and one doctor to another gives a brief report medically of what happened. And I said, listen, I can't help telling you this. Professor Walden says, your Ahmed is a really tough cookie. So the father says to me, well, Professor, until my last breath, I will ever be grateful to you for saving the life of my son. But permit me one small correction. I am Ahmed. The name of the child is Jihad. So I realized that, and I learned later, amongst many people, that jihad, the meaning of jihad, is actually to aspire to spiritual perfection. Many young boys are called jihad in their community, but the name has been monopolized, stolen by terrorists and extreme Islamic terrorists. The deep meaning is one that is purely spiritual. And you know what? It's really rather a common name. There is a brigadier general in the Israeli army he is telling now Rick Jacobs, from the Jewish community whose name is Jihad. So I, he says, fell into this extraordinary trap of tagging and preconceived ideas of what this child was telling me and who he was. Rick Jacob responds saying, what an unbelievably powerful story. It gives an example of the work you do, which is obviously to heal patients and through the work of Physicians for Human Rights and your role in the hospital at the Sheba Medical Center, but you're healing more than patients, surely, by what you're doing. Raphael Warden says, it is true that what happened that night changed my attitude and changed the attitude of many of the staff members of what we make assumptions about, the differences we assume, the perspective and views and positions that we automatically come to our conversations and our work believing. He goes on to say, Raphael Warden, we get people together now at the medical center. Every weekend we have a mobile clinic going into the West Bank of Palestine with a group of 10 to 12 Israeli doctors. And we've opened this free clinic. We treat 300, 400 patients each time. Since there's such a great problem of unemployment and poverty in the West Bank, we provide medication free of charge. We bring it along with us. We bring a mobile pharmacy as well. But what we do even more than that is that we are bringing a face of hope and coexistence into these villages so that it is not just a harsher view of Israelis or the enemy that we presumed this child had. It is doctors and nurses that come in every day. And then he adds that after that moment with the child Jihad, we do something else. We bring groups of emergency room doctors from Gaza, which is an incredible feat, because under Hamas, it is very difficult for anyone to leave Gaza to work in a productive way with anyone in Israel. And we bring them into our medical center for a crash course in emergency medicine. In my city, we have a center for medical simulation, the most advanced in the world, and we allow and train them to work 3 or 4 days there, which gives them so much benefit, so many new skills. And on the last day, always, of this training, we take them to pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, which for many of these doctors is an incredible dream fulfilled, so that they go back to Gaza having all these experiences. So Raphael Walden teaches Rick Jacobs the power of challenging or being challenged about the assumptions of prejudice that we have. For me, this story, with everything that we are battling with at the moment, with everything that we're trying to give to our children to understand the situation better, to speak and discern between healthy critique of Israel alongside and be able to discern when it is no longer that, and they need to be able to identify and have the language to protect themselves. Everything boils down to how we react, communicate with each other. And the story of Moses, Miriam, and Aaron, alongside Raphael Warden, captures that for me. In our prayer book on page 296, I invite you to turn there to see the words of Rabbi John Rayner, Zichrono Livracha. John Rayner really was our own Moses, the most modest of men. In this prayer book, in Sidor Lev Chadash, whenever there is a note in the back that says a new piece, we can be sure it was written by Rabbi John Rayner, who chose not to add his name to the pieces of liturgy that he wrote. So I want to share his words, which I think really capture for us as we struggle with our conversations on social media, we struggle with our conversations even in our own community of how to honor and graciously honor and listen to each other's views. We struggle all the time with assumptions that we make, prejudices that we hold, whether consciously or unconsciously. And it's not often that the Torah speaks so candidly, so instructively to issues that we wrestle with now. John Rayner's words: we are all inclined to make assumptions and cling to them because it is more comfortable to go on believing what we're accustomed to believe than to think afresh. And when we come up against contrary evidence, we tend to dismiss it and say, I've made up my mind, or don't confuse me with facts. Most dangerous are the assumptions we make about people, especially those who differ from us in the way they look or speak or dress or behave, or in the religious or political views they hold. It is so easy to make, and easier to assent to, unfavorable generalizations about them. We Jews have often been victims of such stereotyping. How careful we should therefore be not to commit the same sin against others. I invite you now to turn to the bottom of page 298, where Dean will lead us in Mi Ha'ish. Dean. Let's stand for Aleinu, page 520. Aleinu is the prayer that looks to the future, the building of a world that might be better than the one we inhabit now, and calls on us all to be part of that. Thank you so much about how we gather as a community together, and in a way, Aleinu is that prayer that binds us, and thinking of the moments in people's lives that make them perhaps turn to prayer, turn to congregation. Happy birthday to Sharon Silvermeyer, who marks her birthday today. I'm wondering if David's here this morning for prayer in advance of tonight and what's happening for you tonight, and whether you're just hoping that Manchester City benefits from Finchley Progressive's prayers this morning. So we turn now as a congregation to mark those who are recalling and remembering yahrzeits at this time. We think particularly of David Aarons, husband of Beverly Aarons, of Esther Gerber, mother of Malcolm Gerber, and Artur Turz, father of Vika Dorosh. Zichronam livracha, may their memory be for a blessing. May they be comforted, those who remember and recall their loved ones, with their memories and with us joining them in saying the words of Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shamei rabbah, bi'amah divrach yurtei v'yamlich malchutei, v'hayachon v'yomechon v'chayei dochol Beit Yisrael, magala v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mavorach le'olam omer maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, yitpa'av, yitramam v'yitnaseh, V'ytada v'tale v'talal shemei kudusha brichu leila min kol berchata v'sherata tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiram b'yama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael V'al kol b'nei Adam, v'imru, amen. Let's sit down. Over to you, Tamara, for announcements for us here in the sanctuary as well as at home.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to our service this morning, whether you are in the building or at home. It's wonderful to be together. And thank you to everyone who led and participated in the service, to all the volunteers whose work makes it possible for our services to go ahead. Particular thanks this morning, of course, to Darren, to Elliot, and to David, to each of you for participating in the service today, and also for all of the ways in which you contribute to and enrich the life of the community. Thank you. And thank you, Rebecca, for that remarkable sermon, which I know has given us all much to reflect on and chew over. This week is a relatively quiet week for us at FPS. It's half term, so most of our regular activities are continuing as usual, but there is no Cafe Ivriya tomorrow. There's no delving class this week, and there's no Beit Midrash this week, but all of our other activities continue as normal, and you can find out how to access them from our weekly email. So the only other thing I want to say is that you will have seen that we're having an AGM on the 15th July, and that we are wanting to encourage all of you to consider whether you might want to stand for election to council. The deadline for nominations is on the 15th of June, and if you want to know anything about what it is that council does and what it's like to be a part of it, then any member of council would be happy to speak to you, and all of our contact details are on the back of shofar. So please do consider whether this is your moment and whether this might be your role in the synagogue. Thank you, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Tamara. So we're going to end our service with Ein Keloheinu this morning, which you can find on page 528. So a final blessing for us all before we offer Kiddush. As yet, those of you at home obviously can be having something that you can eat or drink immediately. We will do it in a more symbolic way for us in the sanctuary and the congregation. So as I offered last night, this sense of us being a multi-accessible congregation, whether here in our building, whether at home, the way that we have blossomed over this past year or so, מי ששיכן את שמו בבית הזה, הוא ישכין ביניכם אהבה ואחווה ושלום ורעות. May the one whose presence dwells in this house and all your own homes and houses cause love and harmony, peace and friendship to dwell amongst us all. Amen. Kiddush.
Kiddush. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. אמן.
לחיים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone here. Shabbat Shalom to those of you at home. I will come back and, I don't know why I'm looking at the computer. I will come back and see whoever's still hanging around. But for now, we'll just see out